not the Gauls and Germans crushing the melodies in their throats, but of Roman Christianity. There is none of the rhythmic beat and drive of later Romanesque and Gothic. The subtly modulated pulse or ictus does not initiate the note, but crowns its center, thus liberated from stress, and by their modalities from tension and release. Gregorian melodies float or soar in a series of arches within arches, melismas into phrases, chants, responses, an entire service, as effortlessly soul-enfolding as the vine and fountain of life, sicut cervus desiderat ad fontes aquarum. Jerome's church-softened Latin, one with that art and chant. After the Second World War had silenced the traffic of Rome, one could climb the Aventine, in the spring, say, the morning of Palm Sunday, and at sunrise from the little park over the Tiber look out on Rome under the pouring song of the nightingales. Then enter the church of Santa Sabina, which of all in Rome best preserves the 5th century. To hear Gregorian there is to stand at an Augustinian window. Subdued light filters through alabaster, down the antiphonal of columns, the undulation of arches, along the shadowy retreat of aisles. It lies like a liquid on the marble floor. Or there is the transmutation of the grave in the Ravenna mausoleum of Galla Placida. Against the ego display and drama of later music, consider the greatest contrast Gregorian admits of, the Christus factus est pro nobis, a veiled modulation, the tragic opening mitigated by the suavities of prayer, the exultant close restrained by resignation. It begins, Christ was made obedient for us unto death, even the death of the cross. The phrase hangs in the silence, a pain that is not pain, but soothed to acceptance. A pause, and then, for which God has exalted him, and given him a name above all names. It is the resurrection, the leap from dark, but listen for it. The simple change of range, a faint shift of figuration, for the solemn drop on crucis, the insistent pulse and soar of exaltavit illum, form a contrast as subtly mysterious as the emergence of the Orphic Christ there, in the recess of the Galla Placida tomb. symbolic vine, angels, and lamb, in the amber suffusion of this San Vitale ceiling, sacrifice and triumph soothe the Ausonian dusk of that age. Ausonius, Waddell says, in his Fields of Sorrowful Lovers, Silva Myrtea, from a phrase or two of Virgil's, has created the twilight world of Western Europe. They wander in deep woods in mournful light, amid long reeds and drowsy-headed poppies, and lakes where no wave laps, and voiceless streams, upon whose banks in the dim light grow old flowers that were once bewailed names of kings. Errante silva in magna et subluce maligna, inter harundiniasque comas gravidumque papaver, et tacitos sine labellacus, sine murmurerivos, quorum peripas nebuloso lumine marcent fleti, olim regum et puerorum nomina flores. How far that twilight retains its pagan glow, the search for a parallel teaches. We have had to go back 300 years to the first illusionism of Pompeii. Though the Mosul wine ship of the 3rd century may serve for Ausonius' poem on that river, its grapes and wine, Rolfe Humphreys has translated the opening. What colour are the shallows now that evening moves the late shadows forward, and the river is dyed with the green mountain? All the ridges swim in the ripple of motion, and the vine trembles and is not there, and under water its cluster, seen through glass, is magnified. There was Ausonius, lukewarm convert to Christianity, writing into leisured old age of the warmth and wine of Gaul. And what art will suggest his loved pupil Paulinus, called from that earthly affection by the Christian siren of eternity? Perhaps one of those precursive statues from Augustine's Africa. Not that they beggared be in mind, nor brutes, that they have chosen solitudes and deserts for their dwelling, but their eyes are turned to the high stars, the very deep of truth, and whatsoever wars on the divine, at Christ's command, and for his love, they hate. So wrote Paulinus, translated by Waddell, and then, with a last great but impersonal protest of love, ego te per omne quod datum mortalibus et destinatum saeculum est, I shall hold thee through all chances and fates, he withdraws into the silence, the service of St. Felix at Nola. Spring wakens the birds' voices, but for me my saint's day is my spring. It is the retreat into spacelessness, the current of the time. In the mosaics of Rome and Ravenna, it has been brought visibly before us. Startling to see a representational art with a long tradition in the life of this world, even while retaining its realistic surface, become possessed by an entirely non-representational and symbolic spirit. The bodies stiffen and remove themselves from the flux of things. The eyes widen and grow unfathomable. They were sublunar orbs before. Now they gaze down from the Empyrean. The colors are spectral, gold and blue veils. The symmetry is final, stylized. Nothing is valid in its own right, but as it speaks the known and unknowable divine. The monogram, the lamb, the dove, the cross, the throne, the living font and well. Not Christ, nor any of his disciples, continues as a man. They are caught in the timeless aspect of their being, neither acting nor suffering, yet suffering in a victorious and eternal act. Eliot's At the Still Point of the Turning World. Yet all the residual frames of representation remain, and it is a sensation which takes us to that world's heart, to see these haunting 6th century eyes, longing as the late romantic, yet dogmatically resolved, indifferent, cold, implacable, a trifle cruel, and yet none of these precisely, since none of these applies at that remoteness of vision, an image out of Spiritus Mundi. To see these eyes, of which the soulfulness is vacancy, gazing from the still lush trappings of imperial technique, this is the unforgettable impact of the developing Byzantine. It is as if we saw the Christian spirit divesting itself of classical consciousness, preparing for the Dark Age agony, the fallen world, and unquestioning faith beyond, the stripped intensity and paradox of blessing. While the Grendel of the North pressed at the ramparts, since before Caesar, barbarians had been coming into the empire and being tamed. But as the pressure gained on the power to absorb, the ruptures came. 410, Alaric's sack of Rome. 455, the Vandals. And then, pushed by the Huns, the Goths and Ostrogoths and all the others. Salvian, a Roman Gaul of the early 5th century, the time of this agate vase Rubens once owned, marvels how the broken successor realms cling to the Bacchic insouciance of carefree times. Peace and security have vanished from the whole Roman Empire. Where is the man who fears death and yet laughs? You might say the whole Roman people is saturated with sardonic herbs. It is dying, and yet it laughs. Even Augustine had enjoyed the retrospective villas of that past. With Gregory, 100 years later, we have crossed the divide. Soon afterwards, the wild nation of the Lombards jumped at our throat and mowed down the inhabitants of that country. The cities have been laid waste, the fortresses destroyed, the churches burned, the monasteries torn down. The fields are abandoned by human beings and without cultivation. Wild animals have taken possession of places where multitudes of men lived before. I do not know what is happening in other parts of the world, but in this country where we live, the world not only foretells its end, but manifestly displays it to our eyes. Since all temporal possessions have fallen away from us, we must strive with greater eagerness for things that are eternal. This is the rock gorge that lies between Christian antiquity and the Christian West. But from that or any other time of troubles, how soul would look back to those refuges of Christian love and art, quietly sheltered in the last corruption of imperial power. So, after the Second World War, I wrote in this Ravenna of this San Vitale. From the crushing of Rome, that peace flowed like honey. But what ripens on our tree of pains, past or to come,